Imagine surviving something so traumatic that the plain facts of it are almost impossible to live with. Now imagine that in order to go on, your mind reshapes that unbearable experience into a story you can actually carry. A story stranger and more beautiful than the raw truth. Would that story be a lie, or would it be a kind of mercy your mind offered itself in order to survive? And here is the deeper question. When two versions of a painful truth are possible, one bearable and one unbearable, which one do you choose to believe? A remarkable novel builds its entire power around this question, leaving readers to decide for themselves what they would rather believe. That novel is Life of Pi by Yann Martel, an award-winning book that became a worldwide sensation for its extraordinary story and its haunting final twist. It follows a young man who survives a shipwreck and spends many months adrift in a lifeboat, sharing that small space, astonishingly, with a wild tiger. Beneath its dazzling adventure lies a profound exploration of survival, the nature of storytelling, and the way human beings use narrative to make sense of and endure the most overwhelming experiences of their lives. From the start, the book studies the psychology of survival under extreme conditions. Stranded at sea with no help coming, the main character must find within himself the will to live, the resourcefulness to endure, and the strength to face terror and despair day after day. The author shows how survival is not only physical, but deeply mental, a matter of holding on to hope, routine, and purpose when everything external has been stripped away. The story explores how the human spirit fights to live even in the most hopeless circumstances. It invites you to consider what has kept you going through your own periods of overwhelming difficulty and where the will to endure actually comes from. The novel also explores the role of fear and the necessity of facing it. The presence of the tiger in the small lifeboat is a constant, terrifying threat. And yet, that very threat becomes, paradoxically, part of what keeps the main character alive. The fear forces him to stay alert, to remain focused, to keep fighting. The author uses this to explore the complex relationship between fear and survival, how the things that frighten us can also sharpen and motivate us. The story suggests that fear, faced directly, can become a strange kind of ally. It invites you to consider how the fears in your own life have shaped you, and whether some of them have driven you to become stronger than you knew you could be. A central theme of the book is the human need for stories to make sense of experience. Throughout his ordeal, the main character relies on narrative, belief, and meaning to survive what would otherwise be unbearable. The author explores how human beings are fundamentally story-making creatures, who do not simply experience reality, but constantly shape it into narratives that give it meaning. The story suggests that this is not weakness or self-deception, but one of the deepest ways the human mind protects and sustains itself. It raises a fascinating question. How much of your own life is shaped by the stories you tell about it? And how different would your experience be if you told those stories differently? The novel's famous structure builds toward a profound choice about truth itself. Near the end, the main character offers a second, far more brutal version of his ordeal, one without the tiger or the wonder, and then asks which story the listener prefers to believe. The author uses this to explore one of the deepest questions in all literature. When the literal truth is unbearable and a more meaningful version is possible, which do we choose? The story does not insist on an answer. It places the choice in your hands, inviting you to examine your own relationship to truth, meaning, and the stories you live by. It is a question that lingers long after the book is closed.
The novel also explores faith and the human search for meaning in a vast and indifferent universe. The main character is drawn to multiple sources of belief, finding in faith a way to hold on to hope and purpose amid unimaginable hardship. The author treats this search with great respect, exploring how faith in something larger than oneself can sustain a person through unimaginable hardship. The story examines the human hunger for meaning, the need to feel that suffering is not simply random and pointless. It invites you to consider where you find meaning in the face of life's hardest and most senseless moments, and how that search shapes the way you endure. There is also rich symbolism woven throughout the book, particularly in the relationship between the young man and the tiger. The tiger can be understood as representing the wild, dangerous animal part of the self, the survival instinct that emerges in extreme conditions, the part of a person they must learn to live alongside without being destroyed by.
The author uses this relationship to explore the coexistence of the civilized and the primal within every human being. The story suggests that survival sometimes requires acknowledging and managing the wildness inside us, rather than denying it. It invites you to consider the untamed parts of your own nature and how you have learned to live alongside them. The narrative also examines the strange isolation and the equally strange intimacy of profound solitude. Alone at sea for months, the main character experiences a loneliness so total it transforms him, and yet he also forms a bond, however dangerous, with the only other living creature in his world. The author explores how extreme isolation reshapes a person's mind and spirit, and how the human need for connection persists even in the most impossible circumstances. The story suggests that even in total solitude, a person reaches for some form of companionship to survive. It invites you to reflect on how solitude has changed you and what you have reached for in your loneliest hours. The emotional arc of the book moves from devastation through endurance toward a hard-won peace, and ultimately toward the act of telling. By turning his unbearable experience into a story he can share, the main character finds a way to integrate his trauma and carry it forward. The author suggests that storytelling itself is a form of healing, a way of transforming raw suffering into something that can be held, understood, and lived with. The story explores how giving shape to our pain through narrative can help us survive it. It invites you to consider how telling your own story in your own way might help you carry what you have been through. One of the most remarkable things the book does is refuse to resolve its central ambiguity, and this refusal is itself the point. By leaving you genuinely uncertain which version of events to believe, the author turns you, the reader, into a participant in the story's deepest question. The choice you make about which story to believe reveals something about you, about whether you lean toward the bearable and meaningful or the literal and brutal, about what you need a story to do. The book explores how the act of believing is itself a choice, shaped by what we can bear and what we long for. It invites you to notice what your own instinct reaches for and what that instinct says about how you make sense of a difficult world. The novel also gives unflinching attention to the indifference of nature. The ocean in the story is vast, beautiful, and utterly uncaring, capable of breathtaking wonder and sudden devastation in equal measure. The author refuses to sentimentalize the natural world, presenting it as something magnificent and entirely indifferent to human survival. The story explores how a person finds meaning and holds on to hope in the face of a universe that offers no special concern for them.
It invites you to consider how you make peace with a world that can be both beautiful and merciless, and where you locate meaning when nature itself seems to offer none. Throughout the ordeal, the main character's survival depends heavily on routine, ritual, and the small disciplines that give shape to formless days. Faced with endless empty time and overwhelming uncertainty, he creates structure, tasks, and habits that hold him together. The author explores how routine becomes a lifeline in chaos, how the simple act of imposing order on a day can keep despair at bay. The story suggests that in the most overwhelming circumstances, it is often the small, repeated, deliberate actions that allow a person to survive. It invites you to consider how structure and ritual have helped you hold steady through your own seasons of chaos. The book's deepest resonance may lie in what it offers to anyone carrying something too heavy to face directly. The story gently suggests that the mind's way of reshaping unbearable experiences into bearable stories is not a failure of honesty, but a profound act of self-preservation, one that has helped human beings survive across all of history. The author treats this with compassion rather than judgment, honoring the strange and creative ways the human spirit protects itself. The story explores how meaning-making is woven into survival itself. It invites you to extend that same compassion to yourself and others for the stories each of us tells in order to keep going. In the end, Life of Pi leaves you holding a question rather than an answer, and a deepened appreciation for the power of the stories we tell. A story that makes you examine your own relationship to truth and meaning offers something rare and lasting. Books aren't just stories, they're mirrors that help us understand ourselves better. Comment below with the book you would like explored next and which version of a hard truth you think you would choose to believe. If this kind of thoughtful book analysis means something to you, consider liking and subscribing so more of it can reach you. This video uses AI-generated audio and visuals for educational purposes only. This is just one reader's personal thoughts and interpretations.